In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is your host, Drew Hill, joined as always by Chris Herrington. It is a fun podcast to get to do, one of my favorite podcasts we do all year. It is the Predictions Pod today. So Chris and I will give you some award winners. We will give you the exact order of finish in the East and the West with the playoff teams. We'll give you some finals picks and more. I think we added a few. I added at the last minute here a few Grizzlies over-under stats for us to do as well. So I'm fired up. It should be a fun one. I went through this exercise a little bit yesterday and a lot this morning, and I can tell you it is very hard, Chris, especially in the West. It is very difficult to try to place these teams where you think they're going to finish. I think that's what makes this NBA season so fun. But before we get to that, this is going to probably be a little bit longer of a pod today. Before we get to that, let's talk about the game last night. The Grizzlies beat the Indiana Pacers on the road, and the story of the game, very easily, I thought, was Zach Edey, who I said initiated bully mode, it felt like, for the first time last night, and I absolutely loved seeing that from him. I think that was really encouraging to a lot of Grizzlies fans. He had a lot of moments. To me, the moment was when he put Isaiah Jackson on his hip, pushed him all the way under the basket, turned around, slammed it on his face. And that was kind of the Zach Edey I think everybody had been wanting to see, right? The physical specimen, the muscle mixed with the skill, the hook shot was going. It was all working for Zach Edey. What were your general takeaways of the game, and what did you think of Edey's performance?
Yeah, I've been waiting for a moment like that particular play from Edey because not only is he huge, and not only is he huge with good touch, which is where sort of these hook shots come in, but when you watched him play at Purdue last season, he had footwork in the post. And he had the footwork to get himself to the rim, and that's something we hadn't really seen. We'd seen him, catch and finish at the rim. We hadn't seen him get himself there. And that was the first time we really saw that out of a post play. And I think your hope is that you'll see more of that, going forward. I think the two things jumped out to me about the game. Part of it was just Edey's individual play, and part of it was Edey's play in the context of the team. In terms of the first thing, I really felt like watching the game 3 at Chicago. Something clicked with him about midway through that game. I thought he looked pretty tentative his first 2 preseason games. I thought he looked that way to start the game at Chicago. He looked like a rookie. He looked like someone who was like, things were moving a little bit too fast for him. He was rushing himself. He wasn't really playing with patience or rhythm. And when he came in for the last 2 or 3 minutes of the first half at Chicago, it just looked like he slowed down and settled down. And he played well those 2 minutes. He played really well the third quarter at Chicago. And then I think he was done at that point. And then the game at Indiana was, to me, just a continuation of that, of him just having the patience that, like, just take a beat, get into your move, feel the defense, and not have to rush everything. And so it was good to see him sort of find that rhythm. There'll be games where he slips out of that too. I'm not saying like something's clicked into place, it will never go out of place again. But he was playing with patience and letting his natural talent come through. But the other thing that I think was particularly encouraging was that in the context of that, he was getting all these paint touches, including just straight up conventional, like throw it down on the block, throw it to the big guy on the block, post ups. But the Grizzlies weren't like totally breaking apart from what they've been trying to do. I think the offense was working well around that. You saw a lot of these back cuts, and I think they're getting better with, John Concher on a back cut, Jay Huff on a back cut, Desmond Bane on a back cut. They still got up more than 43 pointers. They still scored 18 points in transition. And so they were taking a lot of threes. They were scoring in transition. They were the driving and the cutting was happening, and they still got Zach Edey touches in the paint. And if you go back to the first couple games, he got 4 shots off in the first preseason game. And that was with no Jaren Jackson and not much John Morant. And then in the second preseason game, he got 8 shots off, but 3 of them were 3-pointers. He got 5 shots that weren't 3-pointers. That was with no John Morant and no Jaren Jackson. And so I was somewhat concerned early on that, like, are you, in the context of this offense, are you not maximizing what Zach Edey can be? And you saw that stuff start to get integrated at Indiana. Now the question is, once you bring John Morant, Jaren Jackson back into it, I mean, that's good because that raises your ceiling. And part of the idea of Zach Edey is that the team thinks he'll fit well with those two guys. But there's also more mouths to feed at that point too. And so, but I thought the context of Edey's play, the combination of Edey's play and the context of Edey's play in the team system was super encouraging in that game at Indiana.
Yeah, so a few things on that. One, I think sometimes, like you watch games with a very analytical mind, and sometimes I watch them from, I think, maybe more of an emotional standpoint, like where I can overreact to certain things and stuff like that. But I do feel like last night, for whatever reason, you and I were exactly on the same page without you knowing it, because here I am kind of checking Twitter, watching the game at the same time. And I had the exact same reaction to that Edey play, that dunk,
Yeah,
of like, oh wow, that's what we came here to see, right? That was
right.
what we wanted to see. And when you tweeted out at the end, towards the end of the game, that you thought that the most important thing was that they were doing it within the flow of the offense, like maybe 15 seconds before that, I had already wrote in the game story from last night, like, and it's especially encouraging that this is coming amid all the controlled chaos that they're wanting to create. Like, he's
Right. Yeah.
operating around that. Um, and so I think that that was pretty important. But, I think it goes to show. So, it's the preseason, so we're not traveling yet for these games. And I was watching on the couch last night, and my wife is like a casual basketball fan, and she knows all the players on the team, but she's not watching games from an analytical standpoint at all. And when that Edey play happened where he put Jackson on his hip and turned a dunk, she said, "Whoa." And I said, "Yep,
Yeah.
that's it. Like, that's how you know it was that type of play." And so I thought I agree with everything you said. It was really encouraging to see that. I think it's also encouraging that you saw a lot of the Grizzlies players say, we have to make an effort to get Zach Edey the ball in these spots better than we did in the first two games. And here they were. Now, it felt like two straight games because he had that stretch, as you mentioned, in Chicago, like making a concerted effort to say, get him the ball. And the idea of this was it was going to help the half court offense. And sure enough, I mean, I think that is something we have learned, is like that those are going to be efficient shots. Like, shots from Zach Edey around the basket is efficient offense. It's just going to be over the course of a season. And so if they continue to do that, that is a way to improve the half court offense. I definitely think that that is something we can take away after just a few preseason games from Zach Edey.
Yeah, now the more he touches the ball in the paint, the better off you are. Just because, again, to reiterate, you'll generate high efficiency offense out of that. Doesn't mean you're going to score every time. You won't. Like, he'll get a shot blocked, he'll get stripped, he'll miss shots, whatever. But in terms of your average outcome of a possession, Zach Edey touching the ball in the paint is like pretty high on the list of what your outcomes are going to be.
A couple other quick things from the game. Desmond Bane looks ready for the regular season, huh? I mean, that was pretty impressive. Came out of the gate on fire last night, had 9 points like really quickly. Um, he played really well last year leading up to that injury that knocked him out for an extended period of time, the ankle injury. And it feels like, he's going to be on pace here to pick up right where he left off. So that was obviously encouraging. I also thought that Jake LaRavia played pretty well without shooting it a bunch. Like, I
Right.
like that he passed the ball pretty well. He was aggressive in going to get rebounds. So I liked what I saw from him last night. And then, you know, Listen, we can't go through this entire podcast without talking about Yuki, because Yuki is a preseason legend now, I think, for the Memphis Grizzlies.
Right.
And he played really well,
Right.
and he had some of the most exciting plays, without a doubt, last night. The backspin, no look pass to Jay Huff for the reverse layup was ridiculous. And then he had a couple other no looks. He could probably just play with the blindfold on because all the passes he throws are no look anyway. So yeah,
He
that was fun.
he is definitely a spicier variation on last year's Jacob Hilliard. Like he's fun to watch with the passes. Someone on our Twitter feed called him snack size Steve Nash. He does play a little bit like that stylistically because he's a good 3-point shooter too. You combine that with the like you're a non-factor on defense, right? I'm a little torn on the Yuki phenomenon because I don't think he. The more I watch him, the more I like him, and he's a good basketball player.
It's fun to watch.
You can't play at this level, even this level at that size, without being a really good basketball player. But I just don't think he's ever going to be a meaningful NBA player. Like if you ask me who's the most fun to watch of the non-roster guys, he's the answer. If you ask me who's going to have the most meaningful NBA career, it's probably like the Mexican guy whose name I can't remember. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be Yuki.
Brazilian Malzina Pereira.
Is he Brazilian? I thought
He's
okay.
Brazilian.
The Brazilian guy, Pereira. He's probably a better bet to have an NBA career than Yuki is. I just think he's too small. He's too small to get by defensively in the NBA. And so to me, it raises a real question of like where the Grizzlies go with it. Like, is he going to really play with the Memphis Hustle this season without being on a two-way contract?
Here's what I'll say. I can offer some context there.
Yeah.
I think that he wouldn't have come to America for this training camp deal if that wasn't part of the discussion. So,
my question is he going to play with the Memphis Hustle without a two-way contract? I mean, most players
I think
in the
that's the plan.
two-way.
I think that was the plan. Part of the idea.
For him to play without a two-way.
Yes. I mean, that doesn't mean it's going to happen. Like, let me be super clear.
Right.
Because if he gets an offer from somewhere else in the world, like, no one's forcing him to play in the G League. And but he wouldn't have come to the States to do this if that wasn't part of, like, the Grizzlies clearly, they weren't going to bring him over here without at least having that conversation, right? So, if you want to read about Yuki, I thought, I was pretty happy with the way it turned out. Pretty nice feature about him trying to learn English. He's telling me about eating American foods and watching The Last Dance with English subtitles in English to try to learn, some of the language. And his Grizzlies teammates really love him. So that experience has been fun. And, I was trying to create the fan club name last night. I think the closest I got was the Click, the celebratory legion for Yuki Kawamura. That was the closest I got. Not very good, though.
No, I kind of like that because it doesn't overpromise. You can celebrate Yuki without thinking that in 3 years.
Yeah. So maybe I'll stick with the Click then if it gets the passive approval. But yeah, no, definitely fun, really fun to watch him last night. Okay, let's go into the predictions part of the podcast. We're going to do a few of these first. I kind of want to start with the awards.
All right.
You good with that?
Yeah,
I know it might give away a little bit, but
no, I'm going to play along with the predictions, even though I'm struggling to have like real to feel very strongly about my predictions on much of anything right now.
I mean, that's not listen. But here's the thing, Chris. Have you considered that maybe that is just because it's incredibly challenging this year and not because you haven't had enough time?
No, I think no. That is
impossible. This is impossible.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's start with Rookie of the Year because I think there is a Grizzlies element to this. I'll let you go first on the first one. I don't think I asked you to do Defensive Player of the Year, but I did write it down. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but let's start with the Rookie of the Year. Your thoughts?
Well, to me, there's 3 players I put in a separate tier from the rest of the rookies in terms of to me, I think likelihood of being in the mix for this. And that's Zach Edey, that's Reed Shepard, and that's Zachary Ricochet at Atlanta. Um, I'm torn on it. I don't have a strong feeling of the three. I think it's those three. I think there's a very good chance Ricochet is the leading rookie scorer this season because I think, I've been saying from the jump, Edie's the most likely rookie to start. But I think there's a path for Ricochet to start for Atlanta because I mean they're just treading water with DeAndre Hunter on the wing. And I think there's a chance for him to be a top three scorer on that team with Trae Young and Jalen Johnson. Whereas Edey, I think there's three guys clearly above Edey in the pecking order for Memphis. And with Reed Shepard, like he's got a really quality veteran and Fred VanVleet sort of in front of him on the pecking order on a really deep team. So I think there's a good chance that Ricochet is the leading scorer among rookies this season. I think Atlanta will be not as good as Memphis and maybe not as good as Houston, but will be in the postseason, will be a play-in level team. I'm gonna go surprising myself. I'm gonna go with Ricochet as my rookie of the year pick.
Wow. Okay. That's an interesting one. So a lot has been made about Edie as the betting favorite to win Rookie of the Year right now, as it currently stands. I think that's a reflection of just where people think he's going to play as a starter next to Ja Morant. Like the stats should be there for Zach Edey. I don't know if it's a good bet per se. Like I don't know if it's a bet that I would make. I don't know if I would like be racing to bet on something like this, and we're not giving out gambling advice on the podcast.
Yeah, we're just picking who we think might win.
I do think that I think Edey has the best chance of winning. The only other one I even like, yeah, I think Edey has a good chance. The guys you mentioned have good chances. Bizelis is slightly interesting because with DeRozan not there, like he's going to have a lot of opportunity. It feels like, and he played
Right.
terrible in that preseason game. Um,
If I were picking an all rookie team, I would round it out. The three guys I mentioned, Ricochet, Edey, and Shepard, I would round it out with Stephon Castle, who I think can work his way into the starting lineup for the Spurs this season. And then I would go with Khalil Ware, who I think was good in summer league, has been good in preseason, and there's a chance he plays a lot because I think he can play with Bam Adebayo in Miami.
yeah, um, yeah. Ware was one that I thought about as well. But yeah, I think Edey has the best chances right now, as things currently stand. Okay. I didn't mention this. I forgot to mention this one. You have any thoughts on defensive player of the year? If
I think
not, I'll just go.
it's so lined up for Wemby.
It
It
is.
almost seems like it's going to be hard for him not to win. But the thing is, I don't think the Spurs are going to be good. But I think his individual numbers will be off the charts, and I think people will isolate what's the defensive rate, defensive efficiency when he's on the floor versus when he's not, and you'll see this enormous difference. Like the on-off defensive numbers for Wemby are going to be through the roof. To me, if there's a wild card, I mentioned this before, I'm worried about the games played. But if someone can mount a campaign among perimeter players, I think the wild card to me is going to be OG Anunoby. Anunoby can get up past the 65 game threshold. He might be a dark horse as the primary defender on that Knicks team. But it's hard. It's sort of hard for me not to pick Wemby. I also think Bam Adebayo. I think he's a guy who has not won it and has been in the mix for a long time. So if Miami has a really good defensive season and maybe the Spurs are winning 32 games and people think Wemby's can win 10 in a row once they get good, maybe there's this like narrative pull to try to squeak one in for Bam before Wemby takes over for a decade.
Yeah, this is an award with a lot of repeat winners. Like as I was looking
Yeah.
at who's won, um, so obviously that's good for Jaren, but I don't think that the pace of the play is going to be good for Jaren in terms of the
Right.
Grizzlies defense as we look at it from a Grizzlies perspective. Yeah, you're right. Wemby's a huge favorite. Um, if you look at like like the Edie thing, like who's the betting favorite? It's Wemby by a wide margin. Next behind him is Chet Holmgren. That one's interesting. I mean, like it's kind of a team award, right? If the Thunder are the best team in the league by far, and Chet's blocking a ton of shots, then there's a chance there. I'll take Gobert again. Repeat. Just run it back. I mean, Minnesota is going to have one of the best defenses in the league. As I said, kind of a team award, repeat winners. I'll just go with Gobert. All right, MVP. You want me to
Yeah,
go or are you?
yeah, you can go ahead. I think we're gonna
Okay,
have the same one on this one.
you do. Um, as I have said, I don't think we are because I
Okay.
went with somebody kind of crazy. Um, I have said for a long time, and I even said this the one year that I was a voter in these awards. I just believe fundamentally that the MVP award should be focused on more than stats. That the MVP award should go to not only one of the best players on the best teams, but who also has just the most eye popping, noteworthy season, right? Like highlights matter, drawing attention to the league matters. Um, and I think that should be factored in an MVP vote. I know it's to some people that doesn't make any sense, but to me, it makes perfect sense. And for that reason, I'm going to take Anthony Edwards because I don't think there's any player right now that's more exciting and more fun. And if Minnesota turns out to be really good, um, and this has no impact on how I voted these teams in the East and the West, but like, I just feel like a player like that should be your MVP in any given season, and that all of that matters. And I think Anthony Edwards is far and away one of the most exciting players to watch. He's on a great team. He keeps getting better. He had a great Olympics. Anthony Edwards could make another leap, and so I'll take Anthony Edwards. That's a long shot pick right there. That's what that would be considered. But you know what? I like it.
So the last six MVPs have been shared among Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Joel Embiid. I think Embiid has zero chance. He's not going to play 65 games. I think Jokic has very little chance unless, if Denver finishes top two in the West, maybe. But he's won so many, I think people are going to look elsewhere. I think Giannis could absolutely win it if the Bucks are a top two or three team in the East, but I don't think they're going to be. And so I think we're going to have somebody new this year, and I think it's going to be that group of Anthony Edwards, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Luka Doncic, Jason Tatum. I think it's going to come from those one of those four players. I do think is who it will be. I'm going to go with Luka because I think MVP has tended to be. It's been hard to like break through and like you're having a great season, even though people don't think you're really a top two or three player in the world. It's been guys who are top two or three players in the world who have won this. And I think even though Dallas might not finish first in the West, I think ultimately enough voters are going to look at it and say, who's actually the best player here? And I think the fact that Luka took Dallas to the finals, that is obviously not part of what's supposed to be this season's consideration, but it's something that he achieved after the vote last year. And the fact that he has accomplished that, I think, has raised the estimation of who he is as a player a little bit. And I think he's going to end up having the best season on a team that's going to be, in that mid 50s win range. And I think Luka's going to win it even without Dallas finishing first.
Luka falls in the grouping of exciting players that bring fans to the league. Like I could see that. I knew that you thought I was going to pick Luka,
Yeah.
but I don't know. Maybe it's because I just started watching Starting Five. Maybe that had an influence. Recency bias with Anthony Edwards. But I I just fundamentally think that whoever wins the MVP award should be the most exciting player in a given season that also plays on a good team that won a lot of games. So I like those two picks off the grid a little bit. I thought someone was going to take Shea. I thought you might go Shea. Maybe I would get to Shea, but I went with Anthony Edwards. Okay.
Want to make a big impact without getting lost in a big system? Join youth villages to be a force for families while becoming part of one. Help make positive changes on a national scale, one community at a time. It takes a family to transform lives. Start with yours. Apply now at youthvillages.org/careers.
Next up, are we going to do? You want to do the Grizzly stats last and let's do the Grizzly stats last and let's start in the East and we'll go order of finish first.
All right.
Which direction you want to go? This is choose your own adventure pod. 10-1 or 1-10? Let's go one.
Uh, you call it.
Let's go 1-10 because I think the top here is pretty obvious in the East.
I think number one is pretty obvious in the East. I think it gets less obvious after that.
That's what I mean. Number one,
Yeah.
very obvious. Yes.
So in terms of regular season finish, I've got the Celtics first. And then to me, it's a real muddle. And you got teams that have high end talent, but depth issues, and teams that don't have maybe as much tippy top talent, but have a lot better depth. And it's sort of how you balance that team to team. I tend, and this will pop up again as we go. In terms of a regular season projection, one of my themes that I'll carry through is leaning a little bit more towards the depth in terms of what I think is going to happen in the regular season. But I still have the Knicks second in the East, just barely. I have them followed by the Cavs at third, the Pacers at fourth, the Bucks at fifth, the Magic at six.
Whoa.
That's where you draw the line in terms of, the 6 to 7 drop. I had the Sixers down at 7. I had the Sixers higher before the Paul George injury. I dropped them down from 5th to 7th after the Paul George injury. And so my play-in group in the East, I've got the Sixers, the Heat, the Hawks, and then that 10th spot is really up for grabs among some bad teams. There's going to be a bad team in the play-in in the East. I got the Hornets squeaking that out.
Okay. Yeah, we have very different lists here. Full disclosure, this was done before the Paul George injury in terms of my list here. I had Boston at 1. I wrote notes on all these teams. Boston at 1. The only note I said was say less. Like Boston's going to be the number 1 team in the East. I had Milwaukee at 2 because Middleton played 50 games last year, and I just think that if he's healthy, like this team's got a chance.
I think he's not. I think he's not healthy. I think he's already not healthy. And the Bucks, if the Bucks finish second, I think Giannis might win the MVP. But I think that team has gotten really, really creaky after Giannis and Dame, and so I think there's a lot of I don't know. I think that team's pretty creaky. That could happen though. They could finish second.
Yeah.
Giannis might win the MVP.
It's just hard for me to look at the roster and the names and not feel good about it. And like Giannis is one of the most consistent players in the NBA too. Like every year he's in the MVP conversation. They're going to be good again. It's how good to me. And I feel pretty good about them. Again, if Middleton can get to 60, 65 games, and again, he may not, but I would feel a lot better about them in that scenario. Third, I have the Knicks. You add Karl Anthony Towns, you lose Isaiah Hartenstein. On paper, this team's really good, right? And they got to go somewhere. And so I put them third on the list here. So the Knicks obviously have a ton of talent, and I think adding Bridges too makes them a much better team. So I put them third. I struggled between the Sixers and the Cavs at 4 and 5. I ended up putting the Sixers at 4. After the Paul George stuff, I may bump them back. Obviously, I'm concerned about the Embiid injury stuff with that pick. Didn't love how he looked in the Olympics either. But Paul George teams usually finish pretty well in the regular season. And so I feel like, if this injury to Paul George isn't something that's going to hold him out an extended period of time. Have you seen any news on that this morning? All I've seen is hyperextension.
Yeah, just hyperextension.
If this isn't something that's going to hold him out an extended period of time, I do feel like they're going to be a good regular season team. So I had them in there at 4, but I would probably bump them back to 5. Cleveland, defense translates in the regular season. Mitchell Garland, and Mobley all failed to play 60 games last year. So if they play more than that, like you would guess that this team's going to have a pretty good regular season record. Then I have Pacers after that, Magic, Heat, Hawks, who I'm maybe a little bit higher on than most, and Raptors after that. I mean, the 10 spot's just kind of a toss up.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, to me, that 2 through 7 range, it could be in almost any order in the East. I'm just sort of betting on over 82 games the superior depth of Cleveland and Indiana, sort of packing up some wins relative to sort of the depth issues of the Bucks and the Sixers. I might change this back before I write and move the Sixers back up a little bit, depending on the Paul George thing. I don't really believe in Orlando taking a big step forward. I don't think their offense is going to be good enough. And so I've got them 6 right now, but I might drop them back down to 7 and out of that top 6.
Yeah, so Orlando was one of the teams that like escaped the injury bug almost entirely last season. They got like 80 games out of Banchero and 80 games out of like almost all their top guys. Can you
Right.
really bank on that happening again? I don't think so. Pacers are interesting. Like that's a team that shoots it really well from three, and they only had Siakam for 41 games. Like they could be really improved, I think.
I think they're going to have a top 5 offense. There's a chance they have the number 1 offense, but I think they'll have a top 5 offense. And I think they're pretty deep, and I think they're well coached. And I don't think they'll get back to the conference finals like they did last year. But I think they're a sneaky team, 50-win team this season.
All right. Did you have the guts to pick anyone other than the Celtics to come out of the East this year?
I did pick the Celtics to come out of the East. I think that the Knicks and the Sixers, if they are fully healthy in the playoffs through 3 rounds of the playoffs, can get to the NBA Finals. But I just think there's so much risk there, given the lack of depth on those teams, and given the known injury stuff with the Sixers and with him, the Sixers in particular, with Embiid and George. My thing is, and I'm going to make a pick, and I'll make a pick when I write this week too. More and more, I see the regular season and the playoffs as separate seasons, and I see not much point in picking playoff stuff. But I see a point in picking the regular season rankings
Right.
and finish. But like last year, I didn't it didn't even occur to me to pick the Mavs make the NBA Finals at the start of the season. But at the start of the playoffs, they were the 5th seed. I actually did pick them to make the Western Conference Finals as the 5th seed because the team had changed. And so the playoff stuff is going to be who's healthy when you get there and how have teams changed over the course of the season. And those two things to me are entirely impossible to predict right now. So based on what teams have right now, yeah, I got the Celtics. Sure.
Yeah, I agree with all you just said 100%. These teams can look drastically different, Trades happen, injuries happen, all of that. All right.
Well, I think if the Sixers have healthy Maxey, George, and Embiid in the playoffs, and
Yeah.
they've either developed or acquired a little bit more better depth over the course of 82, I, I'm not ruling out that I picked the Sixers to make the NBA Finals, but I can't pick it today.
No, and I guess I'm a little higher on the Bucks than you are. But if the Bucks are fully healthy, they have a good roster too. Um,
I agree. I think the Middleton thing and the Brook Lopez thing, I just worry that they're starting to turn the corner. Age wise, I think that roster is really, and there's a team like that in the West too. We'll talk about, but I think age wise, I just worry that the bottom could fall out on that team.
we might be on the same thing. All right, moving on to the West. You went first on the East, so I'll go first on the West. I've got the Thunder number one.
Let's do a little bit different. Let's take it team by
Yeah.
team, and when you do a team, then I'll say where I've got them.
Okay, I've got the Thunder at number one, and the reason being, I think they improved a team that finished first last year. I don't know if there's any team that's built to withstand injuries the way that the Thunder are because they're so deep. And I feel like their floor is maybe the highest of any team in the West. And you could go a number of different directions here, but the Thunder feel the safest to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think most people look at the Thunder and see them as a regular season juggernaut, and I do too. I think they're likely to have a top 5 defense and a top 5 offense. They are very deep. They do not have a lot of injury history or durability questions apparent on their roster. And so I see no reason not to pick them to be a 60-win team in the regular season. So I also have them number 1.
Number two, I have Denver. I had a very hard time with Denver and Minnesota here. Um, I think Minnesota might be a little bit more deep, but I kind of just believe in the consistency of Denver and Jokic. And I think he plays a style where he can stay healthy. And I just feel like Minnesota has more stuff to work out after this trade. They've got more stuff going on in the universe in Minnesota at this particular moment than Denver. So I went with Denver. I don't feel great about it, but I had
So,
Denver at number two.
so you have Minnesota third.
Yes.
Yeah, I also have Minnesota third. But I do not have Denver second. In fact, at the moment, for me in the West, I've got a top three I feel good about, and I feel pretty good about the order in the regular season. And I have a 4 through 6 I feel good about, but I'm all over the place. Literally every day I change my opinion on the order of 4 through 6. And today, as we talk, I got Denver at 6. And Denver, this is very similar to our disagreement on Milwaukee. It's like the exact same thing. It's just the Western Conference version. I think Denver, there's two things about Denver. I think they have fewer good players than they did a year ago, and I think the good players they have are going to play fewer games than a year ago. If you look at Denver's minutes last season without Contavious Caldwell-Pope on the floor, they were actually bad. They were negative point differential without Contavious Caldwell-Pope on the floor. I don't think they've adequately replaced him. I don't believe in the internal replacement with him. But the other thing is, Michael Porter Jr. played 81 games. That's just not happening again. Nikola Jokic played 79. That might happen again, but like it's not going to go up, from that. Aaron Gordon played 70-something games. I just think that they have fewer proven good players, and the good players they have are going to play fewer games. And I think Denver's going to take a step back. Now they have Nikola Jokic and they have a great home court advantage, and they may make me look like a fool. But that's my prediction.
So you put Dallas at 2.
I have Dallas at 2, and I think Dallas. I think the 50 wins last season it's just not the same team that they have right now. They're bringing it into the season. I think everything fits with that team. I think it all works. It all fits. They have the best perimeter player in the league in Luka Doncic. They have shooters around him. They have lob catchers around him. And I think the defense will be just good enough. I think there'll be a top 5 offense. The defense will be just good enough. And I got them as a pretty strong second in the regular season.
I had Dallas at 4, just behind Minnesota. I'm having a hard time figuring out what to make of them. Like I'm trying to figure out if that run towards the end of the season and into the playoffs was like real, and that all again, what your thoughts that these all fit together, or if it was just a good run. And then you've also had Luka, which to his credit has played 65 plus games now in 6 straight years, and like at some point, you have to assume that something might happen. And if they were to lose him, I don't feel good about them very quickly. And so I don't know. 4 felt safer than 2 to me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the injury thing, the injury to a best player applies to one degree or another to every team, basically.
Team. Yeah.
Right. I do think I'm worried about more how many games Kyrie will play. Right. Like are we getting a 60-game Kyrie season or a 45-game Kyrie season? When Luka does miss games, is Kyrie there? If Kyrie's there when Luka misses games, I think they can get through it okay. I just think, again, the injury stuff applies to every team to one degree or another. There are many teams where I have much more concern on depth and injury than I do Dallas. I actually have Dallas as the 3rd best team in the league in the regular season. I think they're a step behind Boston and OKC, but I consider them a step ahead of everybody else.
I was listening to some podcasts this week, like all kinds of different podcasts, ESPN, Athletic, our friend Matt Moore at the Action Network. I was listening to his pod. He really loves the Mavericks to go over their 49.5 win total. And like, he's in agreement with you for sure. And I do feel like, there's a lot of people that are believers in that, but generally speaking, the teams that have really high win totals, guess what? They don't reach those win totals more times than not. So Dallas is fascinating. Dallas was really, really difficult for me. Do we have any thoughts on Minnesota before we keep going forward?
Minnesota talent wise to me are closer to the top 2. In the West, I knocked them down half a notch just because of the uncertainty around the trade. Because they got stuff to figure out, and I have questions about the fit with Julius Randle. But I think the talent now 1 through 8 is about as good as anybody in the league. And I really believe I've always been a Chris Finch fan. I believe in the coach. I believe in the coach. I believe in the talent, and I believe they're going to figure it out. But I wonder about the offense. I think the defense will be top five. The offense was good, not great last year, and I wonder a little bit about that.
In order for Anthony Edwards to win MVP and make that prediction correct, they're going to have to probably finish higher than third in the West. They probably will have to finish first in the West, I think, to do so. So, kind of contradicting myself a little bit. At number 5 is finally where I have the Memphis Grizzlies. There's all kinds of reasons to believe that they can improve, and I think they're going to get close to 50 wins, and I think that's going to put them right here in this mix of this 5, 6, 7 range.
Do you have Phoenix at 6?
No, I have Phoenix.
All right. We'll get to that next then. So in my vision of the West, I got the Thunder and Mavs as my top 2. I got the Wolves sort of alone at 3 when I think about tiers or whatever. And I've just been torn day to day on 4, 5, 6 between Denver, Phoenix, and Memphis. And yesterday I recorded a podcast with preview podcast with Nate Duncan, as I do every year. And he happened to catch me on a day where I was lower on the Grizzlies. Like I've been oscillating between 4 and 6. And to me, 4 and 6 is a win range of something like 46 to 53. So he happened to catch me on the low end, and I picked him to win 46 games and finish 6. But then I saw Zach Edey last night. So now I'm in like a higher point today. Yeah. And I have the Grizzlies at 4 today. But I'm real torn on that 4, 5, 6. But as of now, I go back to the thing I've been saying. My through line is I believe in depth in the regular season. And so I believe in the Grizzlies' depth much more than I believe in the Phoenix or the Denver depth. But I have real durability. I have the same kind of durability questions with the Grizzlies as I do with those teams, even though they're older. So I'm torn between the durability concern and the depth optimism. But I've got the Grizzlies 4th, and I have the Suns 5th.
I agree.
No, you don't agree. You have the Grizzlies 5th.
Well, no, listen, I agree with everything you had to say about the Grizzlies. Like the durability concerns is exactly why they're hard to predict here. And I think that they could easily win 50 games this year. They very also easily could, like their range in terms of number of wins that they could finish with is absurd. Like I think it might be higher than any other team in the league.
If you stipulate to me that Ja Morant, and this is something that Nate asked me this on the pod I did with him. He said, do you think having a full season of Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson, and Desmond Bane guarantees a team 50 wins? And I said, yes. I don't think 50 is that high of a threshold. So if you stipulate to me that Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson all play 75 games, I think the Grizzlies are crashing the top 3 in the West. I think they're going to win in the mid-50s. I just don't. There's no reason to believe that will happen because the track record is that you hopefully they don't miss a lot of games. But the track record is it may be hard for all 3 of those guys to hit 65, much less 75. And so that's my thing. And so, in terms of a regular season thing, I just think the durability questions are such I can't put them up in that top 3. But I think they could easily finish 4th.
I think the reason
I have them there. Yeah.
The reason to believe that this could be that they're going to make it in the top 6 is because defense matters a lot during the regular season. And if this is a top 5 defense, a top 7 defense, they're going to be competitive on a nightly basis. And so based on what we've seen from Edey, I think signs are pointing up. With the injuries to Jaren and Ja, that's obviously not good. That might be arrow down. But I do think that, if this team stays relatively healthy, they're going to be right in the range where they were. Because they were competitive on a night-to-night basis with some of the best teams in the league every time those guys are healthy. Anytime they get on the court, they're going to have a chance to win, whether they're playing OKC, Denver, Minnesota, anybody, if they're healthy. So I feel good about them finishing in the top 6.
So we have 5 of the same top 6 in the West. I have Phoenix in the top 6. You do not. I literally have no idea who you're going to have at 6. It could be one of 5 different teams.
I picked Sacramento.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't know. Listen, this is more about how I feel about the Suns than it is how I feel about Sacramento. They won 46 games last year, which is pretty good. I think they got better. Like they added DeRozan. How that fits, I'm not exactly sure, but the roster should be better.
Right.
And so for that, and DeRozan's a guy that stayed healthy almost every year of his career. He's played a lot of games almost every single season. So that's encouraging. And I think this team hasn't, like, they still have some young pieces that have the opportunity to get better at this stage. And so I went with Sacramento. I mean, that it feels a little risky. I could have put another team in there, but Sacramento won 46 games. They improved the season before as well. Like I feel like they're at least headed in the right direction among the grouping behind these.
For me, the hardest pick to make, like on the board, is like the 11th place in the West. And it's like, what team of the 11 teams that think they're going to be in the postseason in the West, which team is not going to be in the postseason in the West? And I've gone back and forth between a few different teams on that, including Sacramento. I currently have Sacramento 10th, so I do not have them as the team that misses out. The reason I'm lower on Sacramento a little bit is I think they were already a great offensive team, and I don't think DeRozan's going to make them a better offensive team. If anything, I think it might. I think he likes to operate in the same range of the court as Domantas Sabonis does. He likes to play slow. They're better playing fast. I really wonder about the fit with him. It's a talent upgrade. I wonder if it's a fit upgrade. And I don't think he helps their defense. I think their defense overperformed last season. I think their defense will slide this year. And also, I think they were super healthy last year, and I just assuming they were a little bit less healthy this year. So I've got Sacramento down at 10. But there's certainly it could all click, and they could be in the top 6.
Before I get to my thoughts on the Suns, give me the 11 teams in the West. Do you need to pull up a list? Give me the 11 teams.
You mean in my order, or just
no? That think they're going to make the playoffs. You've got Golden State,
Yep,
1, Phoenix 2, Grizzlies 3, OKC 4, Minnesota 5, New Orleans 6, Lakers 7, Mavs 8. Kings 9, Denver 10, and who's the last? Were you thinking Houston?
I think it's Houston. I guess you could debate that it's San Antonio, but I think it's Houston.
Because I didn't really even consider Houston, to be honest.
Interesting. So who do you have? Who do you have at 7? Phoenix.
I have the Suns at 7. A couple things here. So I don't know if you're familiar with Positive Residual, but they do like a ranking of the NBA schedule from toughest to easiest after it comes out. The Suns play more games at a rest disadvantage than any team this season.
Okay, this is good intel.
And in their first 2 months of the season, their opponent winning percentage last year was 55%, which is by far the most challenging. I think this team could be digging itself out of a hole early in the season. They aren't the youngest team, and playing at a rest disadvantage doesn't favor them. Maybe more so than other teams. So, for all those reasons, I bumped them down.
That is a persuasive argument. That argument may influence me on my Suns. Maybe I'll push them down a little bit too. Kevin Durant and Yusuf Nurkic both topped 70 games last season. The odds of that happening again are fairly low. So that works against them. On the other hand, they won 49 last year? I think that they have real point guards now, 2 of them, in fact, and Tyus Jones and Monte Morris. I think that it will be helpful to them. I think the coaching change will be helpful to them. And so to me, it's the coaching change. It's having real point guard play. But there's real risk there with the Durant. Are you getting 70 games or are you getting 35? But that's true of a lot of these teams. And so I think the upside with the Suns is pretty high. But I do think that's a very, very volatile situation. And so I don't have a lot of I got no argument with your placement on the Suns. I have them 5th, but I could definitely see that happening.
Okay, wait, have you done your 7 yet?
No.
Go ahead.
My 7 is the team you hate. It's the Houston Rockets.
Oh, wow.
I was trying to figure out who I believe in this middle group in the West. I like again, thinking about depth over the course of 82 games. To me, they have great depth. I like the depth of Houston. I like the coaching of Houston. Ime Udoka, I think, is a really good coach. I think they have some veterans, particularly in Fred VanVleet, to sort of help things along. There's a lot of volatility there because they may have too much depth in terms of young depth and trying to sort it out and figure out who to lean into and who to lean against. But I think that team can have like a top 10 level kind of defense. And I think there's a potential for some guys to pop. Reed Shepard, Jabari Smith, Amin Thompson. And I sort of believe in Ime Udoka taking all that talent and navigating it to 44 wins or something in the regular season, which I think might be enough to poke the head above the rest of that group. But that could
I
easily
do.
be the team that's 11th too.
Yeah, well, no, I think you make some good points on the fact that they have young guys that at any moment, could explode and they could be a good team. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, no, I am not high on Houston.
So do you have Houston 11th or 12th?
I would have them at 11.
Okay.
Um, and honestly, there's two teams after listening to your point, making me want to change my mind. I am not high on the Pelicans, and the Warriors are a bit of a wild card. So I don't want to give away where those teams are, but
We're up
it's
to you.
it's
We're up to you at eighth. You have the Suns seventh. Who do you have eighth?
I have the Lakers.
Right.
Um,
I
the
have the Lakers
Lakers
not. I have Lakers ninth. So same range basically.
the Lakers have the fewest back-to-backs on the schedule. Go figure. This obviously factors in injuries. Otherwise, I think I would like the Lakers maybe a little bit more. Like I think the Lakers could get to the mid 40s in terms of win total. I don't know what to make of the JJ Redick addition, but I feel like a happy Lakers is a scarier Lakers, I guess. If this is good for them, to use the words of Ja. Um, so I have the Lakers at 8, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Lakers finished higher than 8.
Yeah, the Lakers are tough because the starting lineup that they're going to put on the floor is the same one that beat the Grizzlies in the playoffs 2 years ago in the first round series. But I think that lineup is not as good as it was 2 years ago. I don't really believe in LeBron and Anthony Davis playing the number of games I did a year ago. I think the rest of the roster is just not good at all. Like I think the depth is really bad, and I don't know what to think about JJ Redick as the head coach. And so I've got the Lakers ninth, just on respect for LeBron, and I do think Anthony Davis. If you tell me Anthony Davis plays 75 games, like who
Yeah.
knows, he could win MVP. But so I've got around the same range as you.
Yeah, that's the thing. If they stay healthy, they would be a good team, I think, but I don't think they will. Okay, who did you have at 8?
I got the Warriors at eight.
Okay.
Where do you have them? Ninth or tenth?
I have them at 10. But honestly, I can see that. These last two I have on here, I'm not particularly high on. But the thing is, Kaminga continues to get better, and if he has a really good season, then they might be better than expected.
So when I first started playing with this a few weeks ago, and I was trying to figure out who's 11th, who's missing the playoffs out of this group. I had the Warriors at 11th initially. I do think there's real serious downside with the Warriors. We saw a Warriors team that was earlier in their competitive run, just like have the year they ended up getting James Wiseman, right? They just sort of said, okay, never mind, and just pulled the rug out and tanked. I this team to me the gap between the best player and the second best player on this team is incredibly steep because I don't think Draymond's what he was anymore. It's Curry and a bunch of dudes. And what if Curry plays 55, 60 games? My only thing is it's sort of going against my principle on depth because I think they may have the best depth in the league now. Like I think their second best player is maybe the worst second best player on a playoff team, potential playoff team, and their 11th best guy maybe end up being like the best 11th best guy. And so, if you're going to stipulate this is the roster everyone has, I think they can gut out a mid 40s record with this depth and Steph Curry. I do, but I think there's a lot of downside to the Warriors.
How much does losing Klay Thompson matter? Or is
That
that
doesn't ma-
addition by subtraction?
that doesn't matter much to me. I think it's more of I think they replaced him fine, but I think he was already like a middle rotation level player, and they replaced him with other middle rotation level players. To me, it's a team of Steph Curry and a bunch of middle rotation level players. And I don't believe in the big step forward from the young guys on that team. I don't think Kaminga is going to be an all-star level player. I don't think Pajimsi's going to be an all-star level player. I think it's Steph Curry and like 10 six men basically on that team. And I think you can grind out 45 wins, but if it's not going well, like I could see it like going south in a hurry too.
I had the Pelicans at 9. I feel horrible about it because this feels like a team that could get blown up. It really does.
Yes.
And but then I look at the roster as it is currently constructed, and I say, they might be competitive. And their win total is like 46.5, which is pretty high. It doesn't, to
And,
me, that doesn't make a ton of sense. It's tough. Like this one is really tough. But if they struggle, that team may be, picked apart. We'll see.
as someone who believes in the Rockets, I've been trying to figure out who am I going to have 11th, who am I going to pick to miss the even the play in, and the teams I was debating were the Warriors, the Kings, and the Pelicans. Who today I may change this. Today I have at 11. I think the Pelicans have a lot of talent. I really like the DeJounte Murray trade for them. My thing is they don't have a real center on the roster, and the only so they're depending on like playing Zion there, and I think Zion there with like all this good perimeter talent can be really good. But how many games are you getting from Zion? And to me, when Zion's not on the floor, both when he's just not on the floor in games and when he misses games, I just think they're a big short. And I just think it's a recipe for if when you talk about like, how teams may be impacted if they're missing their best guy, which impacts all the teams. I think it really impacts New Orleans because not only is from a talent standpoint, but from a roster standpoint, they have no he's 6'5" or whatever, but he's like the best big they have. They have no other bigs on the roster. So I think the downside is pretty steep for New Orleans. But if they swing some kind of Brandon Ingram for a decent starting center trade, then like they could jump up to 5 or 6 too. Who knows?
Yeah. Their best interior defense is to not let the other team get to the interior. So we'll see what happens with the Pelicans. So then I had the Warriors at 10. Have we both gotten to every team so far?
Yeah, we might as well just
Okay.
wrap it up quick on 12 through 15. Who cares? I got Clippers, Spurs, Blazers, Jazz.
I didn't do those, but I would
Okay. Oh,
probably
that's right. We
I,
rolled
I
together.
would go Houston at 11, and then I would probably go, yeah,
It,
Clippers.
do- it
Do
doesn't
we?
matter.
You have any thoughts? Who do you think's going to win the Cooper Flag sweepstakes? Who's going to tank the hardest this year? I got the Wizards.
I also have the Wizards. I think it's Wizards, Nets, Jazz. It could be any of those three. But yes, I also have the Wizards.
Um, it's kind of nice that the Grizzlies, I guess, are starting off with the Jazz, because I don't think they intend to lose a lot of games this year. Now that it would be disastrous if they lost. It would. I think the sky would be falling for some Grizzlies fans, but
Right.
um, it is a nice opening game. All right. I have a couple Grizzlies over unders I sent you. We'll wrap
Well,
up with this.
when we did like coming out of the East, you want to do coming out of the West?
Oh yeah, yeah, of course. I got the Thunder.
So you have what, Thunder Celtics?
Thunder Celtics.
I've got just because I'm trying not to pick the Thunder. I mean for today, I'm gonna say Celtics over Wolves in the NBA Finals.
I was high on the Thunder last year. I thought they were going to win that series against Dallas. And to me, they're the deepest team. They have just about everything you could possibly want. They got talent everywhere. They made great additions. They had a defense that was already top of the league, in the top tier of the league, and they made it even better. I'm taking the Thunder to win the finals.
All right.
Are you making a finals pick yet or no? Not
I,
ready.
I said Celtics over Wolves, but
Okay,
again,
Celtics over Wolves.
I'll reiterate that I don't actually care about my own finals pick now. I'll care about it in mid-April.
Okay. Now, on to Grizzlies over unders here. We'll wrap up with this. We talked about the Grizzlies' sort of volatility in the West standings based on number of games some of their players play. This was my favorite over under I came up with. Grizzlies over under 4.5 players that make the minimum game threshold for awards. So 65 games. I put the line at 4.5, Chris. We're going to have 5 players reach 65 games or fewer than five, or 4 players reach 65 games. What do you think?
I'm going to take the over on that one, and maybe that's optimistic because I do have durability concerns on the Grizzlies roster. But my durability concerns are about the best players, and that is not. There's no stipulation here. Like John Konchar could hit it, and that counts too. I did a quick look just at a few teams to see other teams in the West last year if they hit that number. And like every team I looked at, I'm sure not every team did, but it just so happened. I looked at Dallas, yes. I looked at Sacramento, yes. I looked at Denver, yes. I looked at Minnesota, yes. So I think yes, they get to at least 5 on that.
Yeah, I set that at 4.5 because I went back through previous Grizzlies seasons to figure out, roughly where they were. Now, they didn't touch that last year,
Right.
obviously. Um, I'll take the over as well, just to be optimistic and to put some good energy in the air there. But I think that's a good I think that's a good number based on the way that some of the seasons have gone and the questions about durability with some of the players. And you already have a few guys injured to begin the season. I think that's going to be close there. I think they're going to get to either 5 or it's going to come in right at 4. Okay. Jaw season scoring average over under 26.5 points.
I'm going to take the under. I'm going to take the under in a lot of these kind of game counting things just because I think they're going to play like a 10 deep rotation. And I think with Zach Edey now impinging on the touches and the usage around the team, I think even though they'll play a high pace, high scoring brand of basketball, there's a lot to go around. And so I think 26.5 is a pretty high number. So I'm going to take the under on that.
I am going to take the under on it as well. I think the style that they're going to play is going to have an impact on this. We've talked about Ja moving off the ball a little bit more. If his usage comes down, you would expect that maybe the points comes down just a tick. So I'll take the under on 26.5 for Ja. These numbers, by the way, I calculated based on, what the actual sports betting market thinks and just stole them to use for us. Um, Bain season scoring average, I put that one at 23.5. He was averaging 23.7 last season before he got injured. So that is why that is at 23.5. Do you think he goes over or under that number, Chris? You're going to take the under again?
Yeah, same principle. I mean, he hit his number last year without Ja out there, and with Bismack Biyombo and Xavier Tillman not necessarily needing the ball in the middle. And so I'll take the under.
Yeah. I really want to be optimistic on Bain because it feels, as I said earlier, it feels like he's ready for the season. This feels like it's a big season for him. It will be an important one. He was trending on an all-star pace last year before he got hurt. I think they want to get him there. Oh, it makes way more sense to take the under, but I'll just do the over for the fun of it because I think I'm optimistic that Bain is going to play really well this year. Edie rebounds over under 8 per game.
I'll be a broken record. I'll take the under just because I wonder about the minutes played per game there. Is he going to top 30 minutes a game? And I don't know if he hits more than 8 rebounds a game unless he hits the 30-minute mark.
Yeah. I think this is a good number here. He's going to be right in this range almost every single game. Like I'm imagining what box scores look like, and I'm seeing 15 and 7 a lot. So I guess I'll go slightly under, but I feel like 8 is right around where he's going to finish. So I'll take an under on that one. Going to go back to Bain. Threes per game, over under 3.3, which is what he was making last season. I'm assuming you're going to go under again. I'm going to go over. I think they're going to shoot more threes, so I'll go over 3.3. I think that's going to hover right around where he'll be, and if he attempts a lot of them, I feel pretty good about that. So I'll go over again. I'm high on Bain.
Yeah, I'll take a very slight over because I do think they're gonna take more threes as a team this year. And my hope is that those get funneled to the players most adept at making them, and Bain is the top of the list.
All right, these numbers come. I'm going to see if you can sniff out where I got these numbers. I put Jalen Wells over under 8.1 points per game. What do you think? And then I'll tell you why I said
Well,
that number.
the Jalen Wells thing is interesting because he's been really good in preseason.
Yep.
And like to me, it is not at all clear when you look at Jalen Wells, Jake LaRavia, and John Conchar, and you consider everything about them, defense, shooting, experience, all things considered, it's not at all clear what the pecking order should be among those three players going into the season. I think, and I'll probably write something, some little notebooky thing about once we have the final preseason game and just some notes and observations on the preseason, which I haven't really done much. I've been doing big picture roster stuff. Jalen Wells is like second or third in rookie scoring so far in the preseason, and that might be meaningful. But you know who was second in rookie scoring last year in the preseason? Someone who I think is very similar to Jalen Wells in all kinds of ways, the type of player where he was drafted, long-term prognosis, which is good, I think, for both players. Julian Strother from Denver.
Oh.
I think he's a similar kind of player to Julian Strother. And Julian Strother went from like 15 points a game in the preseason to 4.5 in the regular season. I think something like that could very well be possible for Jalen Wells. And so I think there'll be enough games where he plays 5 minutes at the end of the game off the bench and has like 1 point or whatever, that I think it's gonna be hard to get to over 8 on an average. So I'm taking the under on that.
Do you know which who averaged 8.1 points per game as a rookie for the Grizzlies on the wing?
Desmond Bane?
Zaire Williams.
Zaire Williams. No,
that is why the number is set at 8.
I think Zaire Williams stepped into more opportunity than Jalen Wells is going to step into.
It depends on the health of the team.
That's right.
If Jalen Wells does play a significant amount of minutes, I feel really good about him going over 8.1 because the kid is obviously not afraid to shoot. Right? If we learned anything in this preseason is that he is not lacking any confidence. Jalen Wells, Zach Edey, John Morant, and Gigi Jackson were the only current Grizzlies players now to lead the team in a preseason game as a rookie in scoring. That's very difficult to say, but I mean, it just goes to show like Jalen Wells has been really impressive. So 8.1 points per game. I'll go over and just hope that the minutes average is higher than what you might think, because I do think if the minutes average is like 15 in the games he does get into, I think over 8.1, I would feel decently safe. The other one was over 21 points as a season high in a game. That's also a Zaire Williams stat. Zaire Williams, rookie season high was 21 points. Do you think he's going to top that in a game this season?
Well, I looked once. I liked the Julian Strother comp in terms of like preseason and regular season scoring. I looked at Julian Strother's rookie season point total high in a game, and it was 22. So I'm taking the over on that. I think there's a night. He has a night. He's going to have a night at some point.
Yep. I'm going to take the over on that too. Again, because the guy's not afraid to shoot it. I think he's going to get him up. And so I'll take the over on that. But I was curious. I thought you might sniff that one out. I thought you might realize what I was going for there on that one.
Yeah, that's good. I don't think he'll log as many starts as the rookie Zaire Williams.
I don't think so either. Well, that's it. That concludes all of our preseason predictions. The only ones we didn't do are like most improved player, coach of the year. I didn't take any notes on those. Did you have any thoughts that you wanted to add?
Which ones?
Most improved player and coach of the year.
I can't even think about most improved player. If I'm right about the Rockets, then I'll go Ime Udoka for coach of the year. Or if I'm right about Indiana, it could be Rick Carlisle. So I kind of like those as options.
I like Carlisle. I feel like that's a good pick. I think Indiana could end up having a really good season. And the way the league's going, everybody's shooting a ton of threes, and Indiana shoots the three ball really good. So most improved player, I don't know either. My guess would be Wemby's probably the favorite there. If I was just trying to predict. So if Wemby doesn't win Defensive Player of the Year, it's hard to imagine he's not going to win Most Improved. So, that'll do it for us this week. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you go listen to all the other Daily Memphian podcasts. Go check out what Chris and I have been writing over at the Daily Memphian. There's a good feature on Yuki. And Chris, what do you have coming up?
I just as we spoke, I published my fifth and final roster preview column on Zach Edey. I was waiting to see some games before writing about Edey, so I wrote about that. That is up now, and then some of what we talked about, I will be putting in written form for my annual NBA preview column later this week. Well, I will be making some record predictions and all that for every team.
Awesome. Well, make sure you go check all that stuff out. But until next time, for Drew and for Chris, we're out of here.